Hey, this is Chris.
You're the only person I know who plays a solo and then looks sad.
Chris Allison, drummer for Pliny, and you're watching Behind the Kit.
Thanks so much for tuning in today on Behind the Kit. I'm your host, Casey. From now on, you may formally call me Casey or Behind the Kit Man. As you know, Valentine's Day is coming right up, and this year my Valentine is Chris Allison from Pliny. He is a drummer of Pliny, and he is my Valentine this year. So, here is his interview. He's got tons of cool knowledge. He's even in a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater cover band, so very cool stuff. Let's go. All right, guys, here we are with Chris Allison. He's playing for Pliny tonight at the Complex, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So there's virtually no information on you on the internet. Tell us about who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up with Pliny.
I'm virtually a nobody, but no, I've been playing drums for 18 years now, I guess. Locally around Sydney, and an hour north where I grew up, outside of Sydney. And I studied drums for a couple of years. I've got a bachelor's degree in music. And I came to Pliny through the bass player, Simon Grove. I knew him when he was like 18. He grew up in the same area as me. I'm a little bit older, but we played in bands that would do gigs together all the time, and we eventually started a band together with a good friend of ours, Simon Dawes, which is instrumental, a band that we play in, and Pliny heard of me through that band basically. So
Cool.
and that's pretty much how the lineage of everything from there.
How many bands are you in right now?
That's a good question. So I'm playing with Pliny, instrumental, a band called Seims back in Sydney. I'm in a Tony Hawk Pro Skater video game covers band, in a punk rock band called the Phosphourus Bombs, an indie rock band called Los Espinas, a free jazz band called Kurushimi. I think that's virtually it. There's a few other things that I just do on the side, but those are the main kind of bands, I guess.
Cool. Yeah, links in the description for all of these, by the way. And yes, you did hear correctly. That was a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater cover band.
That's right. Good times.
So are you just a hired gun on this tour?
Yeah, so all of us in the band are basically session musicians.
Okay.
So, and that's always been the case with Pliny. You'll see over various tours he's used different people for different things. I'm his drummer for at least for this year. Basically a session musician.
Cool. So how do you handle filling in spots like Marco Miniman and Troy Wright, and what goes through your mind when you're playing their parts? Or
they're big shoes to fill on both parts. It was funny when I was the first gig I did with Pliny, the 2 gigs, they were just filling in at that time for Troy, who was going on to do a lot of gigs over here in the States with the Amity Affliction. And so the crazy thing about like going through all those parts is, those songs, is how differently Marco and Troy play and compose parts. Like Marco was a lot freer with things, a lot looser with the parts he composed, whereas Troy was a lot more thorough. Came up with really interesting parts, and they're a challenge to play every night, but a welcome challenge. So there was definite nerves because, like you said, like those two very high profile drummers. I am not that at all. So it was a bit like, yeah, who is this guy? What is he? Can he do anything? And I'm not saying I did the best, but it came across all right. But it was a big challenge. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you did play on Salt and Charcoal.
That's right, yeah.
How was that, and how did you come up with the parts? Was there, like, I don't want to say methodical, but...
Yeah, well, what Pliny, from what I understand, like we just finished recording an EP, and it was a similar process for those songs as well, but basically it's, he comes up with like dummy drum parts that he kind of, how he thinks the drum part should go, gives those to me, and I basically go, that's cool, that sucks, let's change that, that's not playable, things like that. Because he's a guitar player,
right.
He's got a good idea of what a drummer can do, but obviously he's not going to know all the nuances that drummers would know. So with that, there was a couple of parts that I changed up, but for the most part it was based off his kind of idea. The songs, well, Pliny feels it in 7, I feel it in 4. So it was coming up with different ways that we could make that work for both of us and for the rest of the guys as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was pretty organic. I just, for the most part, any parts that I didn't like that he'd come up with, I just played what felt natural to me to play over those parts, and that's how we ended up with what we came up with.
Do you think instrumental, how do you say instrumental adjective? Or just
Yeah, I just say instrumental, but instrumental
Okay.
adjective, most people call it that.
Okay,
So
we'll just say instrumental. So
That's
do you
cool.
think the instrumental will be coming out with a full-length album soon, or at any point?
That's a good question. That unfortunately, because we're not a full-time band, coming up with that material takes time.
Yeah.
And being able to play it takes probably even more time. So I think at the moment we'll be sticking to EPs, but looking to expand on a few different concepts that we'll be doing when we get home. Simon Dawes, the guitar player, and I, we do the majority of the writing, and then Simo comes in and writes his bass tracks and does a lot of all the production stuff with it. So all that stuff is his genius, basically. So when we get back from Europe in June, dive into some more writing for that, and we'll just wait and see. The hard thing with that band, like I said, is it's not full time. It doesn't bring in any, it's not like we make money doing that. So it's, a handful of shows a year at the moment, and writing when we can. But it's a labor of love, but it's a really fun project and a big challenge every time we play.
Yeah, it's incredible music. Tell me about the Birdman band.
Sure.
How did that come about? Because that seems like the greatest idea ever.
Yeah, it is a great concept. It's a concept that a bass player and the lead guitarist, I suppose, Simeon and Josh came up with. So I play in another band with Simeon, the bass player, called Seims. So that's his like creative project, and then they just had this idea of doing this years ago, and somehow they got offered a festival spot with never having done a gig or ever having a band together. They somehow got offered this festival in Sydney called the Secret Garden Festival, which is a pretty big festival, and we headlined a stage sight unseen, so no one had heard us. We hadn't even heard us. So their idea was always to play the music of the Tony Hawk video games, but the first 3 to 4 games. So anything after that, stick to the classics. So, and then we just built the band around that. So it was all friends basically. We all knew each other in one way or another. Yeah. It's a really fun gig. What I really like about it is there's no prep time, because all that music's so ingrained in me from being a teenager that it's just like, oh, that song, I know how that goes immediately. So it's good fun though.
So you were also a big player of Tony Hawk.
Yeah, not as big as everyone else. I'm not the biggest gamer around, but I definitely dabbled in my youth. So so all those songs very deeply ingrained in all of us pretty much.
So you teach lessons through Skype, and then you work as a teacher somewhere, correct?
Yeah, so I teach at I do most of my teaching out of a place called the Drum and Percussion Co-op, which is a shop in Sydney, amazing drum shop. If you're ever in Sydney, go check it out for sure. So I do most of my teaching out of there. I was teaching privately in another school, but I had to drop out of that to come and do all this stuff. So, and Skype, whenever that happens, that's not a big thing for me at this stage, but when it does happen, I try and make that happen as well.
Yeah. So with teaching in mind, what are the 2 or 3 most common problems you see with drummers, if there are any common ground?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It really is dependent on people, but like the most common things are just playing too stiff, like playing too tense, holding the sticks too tightly. One thing that I find that a lot of people tend to overlook is double strokes. For me, that's half of my anything that I play is based off double strokes. So that's a big thing with me, is getting that happening for a lot of people. And then just pulling a good sound out of the drums. Sometimes that can be one of the hardest things. So just teaching, again, how to play a correct stroke and making the drum work for you rather than you trying to belt the drum into oblivion to get a big sound out of it. So some of the guys are pretty not astounded, but they're surprised. Like I think we're 20 shows in or something on this tour. I've broken 2 sticks out of 20 shows, whereas previously other people that have done the gig have broken a whole bunch. So not to say that there's anything wrong with technique, but it's just the way I play. I don't break sticks very often. I don't break cymbals very often, and skins almost never nowadays. So I think that things like that are really a big part of my teaching. And the one other thing that I harp on about, and some of my students will tell you this as well, is just playing with intent. So not just doing something because you know how to do it, but doing it because you want to do it. Or not just doing something because it's the only way you know how to do it, but specifically choosing to play that certain way for whatever the gig is. So that's a lot of basically my teaching philosophies, I suppose.
Is up-tempo jazz still your weakness?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, very much so. Still a work in progress, but there's a lot of other weaknesses, but that is definitely still a big one. Still a big one.
If you could pick one song that you've played on the drums on any record to represent you, what would it be?
Maybe Panopticon from the last instrumental record that we put out, just because that's got a whole bunch of stuff. It's got a bunch of groove. It's got some spasticky kind of chaotic drumming and some metric modulation stuff going on. So I'd probably say that, although that's a tough one. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Link in the description. Hopefully, is it on YouTube? Do you think?
Maybe.
I know
we
it's
should
on
be putting
iTunes,
that up
'cause I've
there pretty
listened to
soon.
it. Okay.
It's on Spotify and
Yeah.
Bandcamp and all that stuff, but I think we're going to put it on YouTube soon. So.
Okay. And then what is your double bass technique like?
Very bad. No, it's not terrible, but before I started playing with Pliny, I hadn't practiced double bass in a decade probably.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like in the instrumental, I don't use that at all. Single pedal. And same with Seims. That's all single pedal stuff. So most of the time, I'm only using single pedal. So I had to really bring myself up to scratch with double pedal to get through this gig because again, both Troy and Marco, phenomenal double bass players. Again, big shoes to fill, quite literally.
Yeah.
So I've worked out a few exercises that work for me, so I can do things that I want to be able to do. Still, again, a work in progress, and something I'll be working on a bit more when I get home as well, just to play more creatively with double bass. I got a little bit of speed, so it's just trying to get interesting ideas out. That's basically what it is. So it's all heel up though, if we're talking strictly technique stuff.
Yeah.
With double bass stuff, all heel up.
Well, we talked about not ever breaking sticks or cymbals, but have you had any bad drum malfunctions over the years?
Not really, no. I have broken sticks in the middle of a song before. That has happened, but nothing major. I don't think I've ever had a cymbal stand fall over or anything like that. No broken skins during a show. None that are coming to mind.
Good.
Not saying they didn't happen, but
Good.
none coming to mind. So I've been lucky. So fingers crossed.
So who are your main drum influences?
That changes a lot, but currently it's mostly jazz guys like Mark Juliana, Eric Harland, Tony Williams, Vinny Colaiuta. In terms of heavier drummers like Matt Garska, everyone should know who he is
much
by now. Guys like I'm drawing a blank. Other metal guys were Chris Penny when he was with Dillinger Escape Plan, that. When I first heard that stuff totally blew me away. That was insane. Thomas Hark from Meshuggah, of course. Elliot Hoffman from Car Bomb, another ridiculous drummer. And Lars Ulrich would be another one in terms of heavier drummers. And then a bunch of other jazz guys, which is Nate Wood, for example, is phenomenal. Nate Smith. I could go on. So all those guys basically.
So if you could take drum lessons from anybody, dead or alive, who would it be?
Only one?
Yeah.
One person?
You could pick a runner-up though if you want.
Okay, cool. Well, I actually tried to tee up a lesson with Dave Ehrlich when I was in LA, but it didn't work out for various reasons. So I would like to get a lesson with him because he's a pretty revered teacher. But someone like Joe Morello or Jim Chapin would be great, just for hand stuff particularly. I'd go to Virgil Donati for feet. So if I was going to do anything feet related, he'd be my guy for that for sure, because no one plays double bass drum like Virgil Donati.
Not even Thomas Lang?
Not even Thomas Lang. Nowhere near. In my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. So in regards to the hand technique, do you think that traditional grip is going away?
Well, I used to play traditional grip. I played traditional grip for 10 years exclusively, until 4 years ago maybe.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to say yeah. Even a lot of those guys like Thomas Lang, famously moved from traditional to match grip in the last couple of years. Even Steve Smith went away from it. Dave Weckl had a couple of gigs where he was doing match grip. So I think it is a dying art, which I think is a shame, but also it's just a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Things evolve, so it kind of makes sense. But it's something I practice every now and then, but every now and then you might see it tonight. Pliny will yell out at me, traditional grip. So that's my cue to try and play whatever we're playing, traditional grip. We have a bit of fun with stuff like that, so yeah, maybe that'll happen, we'll see.
Okay, so if you were stuck on a deserted island and you had 2 drum items you could take with you, like a kick snare, hi-hat snare, whatever, 2 of those kinds of things, and 1 album, what would it be?
Oh, 1 album. Oh, that's tough. Okay, so I guess drum-related things. So, yeah, kick and snare, or maybe like a practice pad kick and snare. Keep it down on the deserted island, so don't want to ruin the bliss of being in nature. And 1 album, probably Voodoo by D'Angelo. Probably that. Yeah.
Nice. What's your favorite part of your kit right now? This one you're touring with?
Can I say all of it?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, that kit.
Sonar,
it's
correct?
It's a SQ1 Sonar, and I've not played one before. And it's a phenomenal kit. Really hard to make that thing sound bad. So, yeah, probably the snare drum on that, because it's got a lot of versatility. It's a bigger snare drum than I'd usually play. It's a 6.5.
Oh wow!
So that's pretty cool. Cymbals, probably my 19-inch K-Custom Hybrid Trash Smash. It's got like an inverted bell. It sounds like a China, but it's a crash. It's really rad cymbal, so I always love playing that one. So
cool. In the U.S. tour so far, what's the coolest thing you guys have done? On an off day or just for fun?
We had an off day in Jasper, in Canada, which was just really beautiful. It's kind of like around here, like snow-capped mountains everywhere, but it's this really quaint, like small little town. Bit of tourism comes through there and whatnot. That was just nice, just a nice day off. Different to, we had a day off in Jacksonville, Mississippi, and which was nice, but very different experience to say Jasper. So I'd probably say that.
Nice, cool. Well, thanks so much again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Kit. I've got 2 more interviews. I'm not sure if I'm going to post them here or just on a podcast form. Just 30 minutes of the camera being still. There's no live footage or anything. So let me know if you guys would rather hear that in a podcast or if you'd want to just have the 30-minute awkward video of the conversation. A lot of good knowledge in there, though. So I want to get it out in some form or another. All right, well, I'll see you guys next time.